Meanwhile, more developments are expected in Britain today, with 4 past and present Scotland Yard chiefs fronting a public hearing to answer questions about their flawed investigations into the scandal. A short time ago, I was joined from London by the chairman of the House of Commons Culture, Media and Sports Committee, John Whittingdale. Mr Whittingdale, in recent years you've chaired hearings into the phone hacking scandal. How many times do you think that you were lied to by News International staff or by police?
Well, originally we looked into the phone hacking as part of a wider inquiry, and we were told at that time that firstly there had been no evidence to suggest that more than one reporter had been involved, and secondly that there had been an investigation into it afterwards, and that had produced no evidence. Now I have to say that I simply don't believe those things. We then followed it up when further evidence was published by a newspaper, The Guardian, and we had in 5 executives of News International, and we questioned them about this investigation that was meant to have taken place. They again said that nobody else had been involved, and I continue to believe that that is untrue. And we now have James Murdoch on record saying that senior executives have misled Parliament.
So would you go so far yourself as to say that that Parliament has been misled as part of a deliberate cover-up?
Well, that is certainly the impression that has been given. And when James Murdoch himself says that Parliament has been misled, that obviously is a very serious matter, and we will be wanting to follow that up.
We've heard some fresh revelations today about the breaches of privacy of the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown by newspapers within the News International stable. How much more do you think there is yet to come out, and do you think it's going to extend beyond the News of the World newspaper?
I think there probably is still quite a lot to come out. The police are working their way through an enormous amount of evidence, and we're still only sort of halfway through that, and every day is bringing new revelations. There are certainly rumours around that other newspapers were carrying out similar practices. We haven't yet seen evidence of that, but it may well come out in the next few days.
What do you believe should be the culpability of the former News of the World editor, Rebekah Brooks, in this?
Well, Rebekah Brooks was the editor of the News of the World at the time when the phone hacking took place of Millie Dowler, who was the child who was murdered. Now, it was the revelation of that, which caused, I think, the real public anger in this country. And she was the editor at the time. She then went on to become editor of The Sun and then chief executive of News International. And I think most people think that she should take responsibility for what went on when she was in charge.
And do you think that yourself?
Yes, I do.
Why do you think that she is being protected at the moment by Rupert Murdoch?
Well, clearly she has a very close relationship with Rupert Murdoch, and Rupert Murdoch obviously accepts that she was not involved. But in a sense, that's not enough. Whether or not she was involved is something which will become clearer, I hope, as a result of the investigation that is going on at the moment. But even if she weren't, she was the editor of the paper at the time of when what I think most people regard was an utterly appalling act took place. And therefore, I think ultimately she takes responsibility.
Mrs Brooks refused to appear before your most recent round of hearings. Is that right? And what was the reason she gave for that?
Well, at the time that we held our hearings 2 years ago, we were unaware of the phone hacking that had taken place earlier, the Millie Dowler phone hacking. We were looking specifically at the period around when the one reporter was originally arrested. Rebekah Brooks told us that she was not involved in the News of the World at that time, which is true, and therefore that she couldn't give us any more information, and instead we should talk to the people who were there, which is what we did. And we accepted, we asked her to attend, but she said she couldn't, and we didn't press it because she wasn't central to the newspaper at the time that we were looking at. Now, obviously, things have now changed, and it turns out that these phone hacking activities were going on for far longer and were far more extensive. And that is why now I think we would want to ask her some very serious questions.
Do you regret believing what you were told at the time in those hearings? And looking back, is there anything more that you could have done to get to the bottom of it at that time?
Well, we didn't believe what we were told. We published a report 2 years ago in which we stated very clearly that we did not accept the evidence we had been given. We said in our report that we regarded it as inconceivable that only one person had been involved, which is what we were told. And we used phrases like obfuscation and collective amnesia when talking about the reluctance of News International to give us evidence. So I think we were pretty clear even then that we thought that we were not getting the whole truth. And everything that has happened since has borne out that view.
So why do you think it's then taken so long after that for things to actually explode?
Well, the biggest question in all of this, actually, is that all the information that is now coming out has been in the possession of the police for something like 4 years. And for a long time, it sat in boxes and they just didn't bother to look at it. Indeed, we were told in our inquiry 2 years ago by another police officer who'd reviewed the original investigation that there was no new evidence. And that is why there are now very serious questions being asked here about why the police didn't do their job properly.
And do you have any theories about that yourself?
Well, I think there is a general view that the relationship between the police and the media has become far too close, and that there was a sort of unwillingness really to discover the full extent. It was very convenient for them to say, oh, well, it was all the work of one reporter and nobody else was involved. And that was the attitude the police took, to the extent that they didn't really even bother to talk to anybody else.
You mentioned the relationship between the police and the media. What about the relationship between politicians and the media, and specifically the Murdoch empire? Has that Murdoch newspaper and TV empire wielded too much power over politicians in Britain?
Well, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, has himself said that he thinks that the relationship between politicians and the media needs to be looked at. There is no question News International is a very big player in the British media market. You know, they own 2 very successful tabloids, they own 2 broadsheets, and they already own a large chunk of B-Sky B. Politicians, of course, want to keep on side and to be close to major players in the media market. But I think that maybe it has strayed too far, and certainly that is something which I think is going to be examined as part of the overall general look at the relationship and the way the press is working in this country, which is now going to take place.
John Whittingdale, thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
Not at all.